Everyone, and welcome to the October 13th Budget and Finance Committee meeting for the City of Franklin. The first item on the agenda is called to order, and I'll do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Present.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Present.
And the chair is present. Alderman Baggett is not here. Is he coming?
He's not going to be here.
Okay, so he won't be here at all then.
He's watching from afar.
All right.
That's right.
Oh, I remember that from Tuesday night.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, second item on the agenda is approval of minutes, and I'll entertain, from September the 8th, I'll entertain a motion if there's no corrections, deletions, or anything as far as the minutes.
Right.
Move for approval.
Second.
Let's do a roll call vote. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, let's go to item 3, consideration of draft resolution 2022-67, a resolution adopting a customer service policy for the city of Franklin.
And I'll introduce Jessica Davies. She is our licensing and revenue manager and city court clerk, and this is a project that she has spearheaded along with a working group of other staff to be part of this process. So I will let Jessica introduce her item.
Thank you, Christine. Good afternoon, Alderman. Good to see all of you. So I'll just kind of walk through this and share a little bit with you, and then if you have any questions, certainly we'll be happy to answer those. As you know, the City of Franklin services approximately 30,000 residential and commercial water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste customers. And the Revenue Management Department is charged with billing and collecting those utilities. So we want to be accurate in our collection. That's one of our top goals. But another top goal is, as it relates to billing and collecting these utilities, we want to be consistent. We want to provide really good customer service. And so in order to do that, we feel it's necessary to have consistent policies and procedures that we follow. And our Franklin Municipal Code offers some guidelines, but it's pretty vague or broad in a lot of areas. And so that's kind of how we got where we are with this written customer service policy. There are some informal policies that have been long-standing, and we've been following them, with no written approved guidance, but they've been long-standing best practices of our office. And so what we did was compile them, draft them into this policy to organize them and cover various functions and practices in our office. And it was attached to the agenda, so I'm sure you've looked at it, but just to highlight a few of the things that are in it that are probably of importance to you. The code talks about applying for service, but in the policy, we really detail how that works, what documents a customer would have to provide in order to open a utility account. Some of the other things, what kind of payment methods we take, and what happens if we have return checks, policy related to that. Payment arrangements is a big one. If someone finds themselves with a pretty large bill that they're unable to pay, we detail in the policy the promissory note process for 3-month payment arrangement, 6-month up to 12 months. So we detail how a customer would qualify for that, and how, the different levels there. What happens if they dispute a bill, how they can go about trying to get that reviewed. Some of the customer programs that are in here talk about bank draft. Our customers that maybe have a medical necessity and can't have their water turned off, there's a section that talks about that, what we require in order to put them on that special list for a no cutoff. Another big one is our customers who receive property tax relief from the county trustee. We get that list from our county trustee, Karen Paris, and we waive their sanitation fee every month. So that's listed in the policy. That's something, like I said, it's a long-standing practice, but we want it to be formally adopted, so that's in here. And then another big one that's at the very end are all the adjustments we make, which the big one is a leak adjustment. We also do pool adjustments, so there's a description of how you qualify, what documentation we need for that, and how it's calculated. So those are just a few of the things in here. And you know, we feel like having this written policy officially adopted by resolution is really going to do three big things for us. Number one, it's going to provide guidance to our staff when customers come to us and make an inquiry about how do I get service? What happens if I have a leak? What if I can't pay this bill? Then we can look at this. We can figure out what, you know, what covers their situation and how to handle it. The second thing is ensuring consistency. Like I said at the beginning, we feel like we're consistent and we follow the rules, but having it written, we know then we're always referring to this and we're always doing the same thing for each customer. We're not just arbitrarily, you know, deciding how to calculate a leak adjustment, for example. And then finally, you know, if sometimes a customer is not always satisfied with the answer, having this policy written and adopted really helps. They can refer to it. A lot of times they'll even ask us, well, show me your policy. I want to understand it. I want to read it. So that's going to be helpful. We're even going to put it on the city's website with our other financial policies for their reference. So this is, like I said, nothing new, really. These are all long-standing things that we've been doing, what we feel is best practice, but the big thing is to get it formally organized into one policy, and that's going to serve as an easy reference for our staff as well as the customers. So, any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
I have a very small thing, because I thought this really was very good and very straightforward and would be helpful. On that number 12, and I didn't say anything about this, on number 12, the second sentence says payments must be made to revenue management. Then it had, in parentheses, include or omit.
I believe you found a typo,
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
which is much appreciated. Thank you.
And it's still in draft form.
Yeah.
And,
But I thought it was very good, very well done, and did let everybody know exactly the way that everyone is going to be, treated on it.
I want to reiterate what Alderman Peterson just said is, this is actually one of the very first questions I got once I was sworn in, was what was driven around this, and had I had the opportunity to refer the constituent to this, it would have been a great resource. I know, Eric and I had several conversations offline of how to handle certain things, and this immediately addresses this. I think this is the right thing. I'm actually very surprised that we didn't have anything formalized like this before. Having a strong background in customer service and customer satisfaction, without these guidelines, it is exactly what you said. It is piecemealed together.
Right.
And it's, you learn from one person to the other person, and a lot of times best practices aren't passed along, and sometimes these lessons learned become harder and harder when it's not formalized. So I am
Agreed.
strongly in support of this.
And I can give you a little bit of background, too, that certainly we had office procedures, and those have been in place, and that has certainly guided our staff. But sometimes office procedures are a little bit more, they can get it too far into maybe what buttons to put. I mean, it's not exactly what buttons to push, but they sort of feel that way, but they're not. What Jessica has spearheaded here is a document that is understandable to the customers, but is also clear, but it does have enough detail to be a guide for staff as well. So we still have to have procedures for what steps to take as staff, but this is an extra step that I appreciate your comment, your supportive comments, Alderman Potts, because we're looking forward to, upon full board wanting to do this, being able to have a policy that we can, give out to customers very easily.
I was just going to ask one question as we move forward. We have some significant changes coming right now regarding water management, and the incorporation of quickly updating service guides in alignment with this and any other updates. Do you think that you'll start doing quarterly or an annual review of this document? What do you think as far as moving forward?
And you're referring to the Tower Read program, the new meter reading
Yeah, and I just
program?
realized my mic wasn't on. I
Yes.
was just asking, for those that couldn't hear me, once we formalize this and move it forward, will we look at this on a quarterly basis for small updates, or will we look at it annually for larger updates?
Well, what I see this policy becoming is because we certainly have lots of other policies that are in place within the support services, is at least on an annual basis, our policies are reviewed by the staff who takes the lead. Certainly Mike Lowe comes back in June, and there's usually at least a handful of policies that we do ask for either some tweaks or significant overhauls if that's necessary. But we do bring policies back times other than June, such as this one. We've been following it, and it was ready to go, so we just, we thought this would be a good month to bring this to you. So most of the time you see policy updates in June, but that is more of it's not a rule. And so you do see us more often when we, as staff and consultation with our city administrator, believe that we don't want to wait until that typical time that this committee here's lots of policy updates.
And I was actually talking to my staff about that today, that we may realize after the first few months that we left something out or we need to clarify something. And so we may have more frequent reviews and possibly updates the first year or so. And then after that, maybe once a year might feel sufficient. So I could see us doing some more frequent reviews this first year as we really start referencing it as customers come forward with issues. We might find some things that we need to tweak.
So, yeah, I would say minimally, on a minimum level annually, and then more frequently as needed. And as Jessica said, especially some of this being put together, although long-standing practices put together in this way, there may be some other things that come to light that, oh, we do that, we should add that too, or whatever else there might be. So I appreciate the effort very much of the team to bring this forward and make it clear for everybody. I have just some feedback for all of you. A lot of times we bring stuff to the committee, and one of the things we ask you is, do you think this should be presented to the full board or in a work session discussion, or just move it on as a normal item? I just would look for any guidance if you think there's value in bringing this to the full board, or just I can highlight it in my update to the board too, or all options. Just get your feedback if you think it's worthy for that or not.
I think it was really well done, and it really might be worthwhile for everybody on the board to see how much time and effort has been put into this. I mean, even though we've been doing it all the
Yeah.
time, but just to see it written and then could be referred to.
And some of these are things you run into as you serve as alderman. You get these questions, and it's a great reference document for you. And one of the notes I made to myself is we've got that web page that says BOMA resources. We will certainly make sure this is on that
Yeah.
web page as a ready reference for you all.
And I'll just follow what Alderman Peterson just said is, I like to celebrate and coach in the moment, and this is one of those celebrate in the moment type things. And I really think a lot of time, energy, and effort has gone into this, and that we need to recognize that at a work session, and then at that point, maybe comes just a consent agenda item moving it forward. But I also think that, as you just referenced, Eric, is that other aldermen need to know it's available, where it is, and I don't think it should be just a part of a new alderman package.
No, right.
And when there's other updates similar to this that would help us to help constituents move things forward faster, that I think that could be a good update at work sessions.
Yeah.
I'm indifferent, because
Okay.
I don't really think it's necessary to drag it through that many different steps and processes. But you're going to have to vote on it, so it can't be on the consent agenda necessarily. Okay, so if you want it on the work session, we'll put it on the work session at some point in time, and whenever you get ready to do that. And you could have it on the same night and vote if you want to do that then.
Okay.
But, so it goes to the work session, then it comes to the full board for a vote. And we need a vote here to move it forward then. So I'll entertain a motion to consider draft resolution 2022-67.
So moved.
Proper motion to a second.
Second.
Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that.
Thank you very much, and I just feel compelled to say I really appreciate all of your positive comments. I just want to make it very, very clear that Mike Lowe had a big hand in this. He was very helpful in getting this started, and then my customer service supervisor, Tabitha Byram, was essential to getting it as good as it is. So I don't want to take all the credit for that.
All
Great team
right.
effort.
Yes.
Thank you all.
All right, let's go to item 3, consideration of resolution 2022-68, a resolution authorizing the use of the competitive seal proposal procurement method for choosing the service provider for non-discretionary investment advisory services for certain non-pension assets of the city for a term of award for the Finance Department Purchasing Office Procurement Solicitation Number 2023-007. Brian, Christine, you'll start that. Brian, whichever one.
Very, very quickly, because we certainly, this is an item of procurement, the very start of procurement process on behalf of our finance department. And we wanted to bring that through this committee because certainly you, every year, do hear an update on our non-pension related investments that occurred just this last month. And we do engage professional services to assist our staff. All of the decisions are made by our staff, but we do have professional services to help us in that process. And we are very glad to have our purchasing manager, Brian Wilcox, who is spearheading this process on behalf of the finance department to explain what the process is and what we're asking to start.
Thank you, Christine. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, hello again. I'm Brian Wilcox, the purchasing manager for the city. The city periodically solicits proposals for these services, non-discretionary investment advisory services for non-pension assets of the city. And the time is approaching for when we next solicit those kinds of proposals. The purpose of this resolution is to authorize the use of the competitive sealed proposal procurement method for choosing the service provider. Tennessee law and city ordinance both require the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to authorize use of the RFP method for choosing suppliers and/or service providers whenever the board determines that the use of that method, the use of competitive sealed bidding is either not practicable or not advantageous for the city. For these services, again, non-discretionary investment advisory services, the competitive sealed bidding method is either not practicable or not advantageous because qualifications, experience, and competence are more important than price in making the purchase, and because there is more than one solution to this purchasing issue, and the competitive sealed proposal procurement method will assist in choosing the best solution and service provider. So staff recommends that the Resolution 2022-68 be recommended for approval to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Any questions from the committee? If not, then I'll entertain a motion of approval and forwarding to the full board for acceptance.
So moved. So moved.
Proper motion there is, and a second. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also. And item 4, report of the actuary for the city's pension plans. Christine?
And while our special guest is getting settled in, I would like to do a bit of introduction that for this month's committee meeting, I did invite the city's actuary, Kevin Sullivan with the firm of USI to join us today, because we certainly, Tennessee state law as well as accounting standards now require an annual review of defined benefit pension plans by an independent actuary. And this is something that with the city of Franklin, we have USI engaged to serve as actuary for our closed single employer pension plan. We also have an open multiple employer pension plan with Tennessee Consolidated Retirement Systems. And it just so happens that USI, while it may be a different lead actuary, but the firm USI also serves as actuary to the state of Tennessee. And so in the past, I have actually done this update comparison to you as staff. I certainly am not a licensed actuary, but I have played one in presenting summary information to you. But this year, I wanted to bring our actuary, certainly our Chairman Barnhill and Mayor Moore serving on the pension committee. They hear regular reports from our actuary directly, but I wanted you to have this experience as a committee to realize, so certainly the actuarial reports do make a big difference. They certainly are used for our audited financial statements, but in addition, they are part of our budget process. A big part of our budget process is, and the city administrator is always waiting for when those pension contribution amounts are going to come from USI into his budget process and we have placeholders, and we're doing our best to guess what those numbers will be, but as we are required to fund our pension to the amount that's required by the actuary's calculations, that is a big part of funding the city of Franklin is the funding of these two pension plans. So this is a year that certainly I staff have advised with our pension committee that I have concerns because of the investment returns on our portfolio for the closed pension. That's by far our largest assets in our pension is that closed pension. That's a 50-year-old pension plan that has lots of retirees, so we don't have as many actives as we used to. So certainly we're paying out a lot of benefits that are very important, but the returns this year when those on that closed plan, when those are reported for 12/31, that will have an impact on next year's budget process. So there is an implication that, I know it's not December 31st yet, but I watch those quarterly returns and certainly that gives a little foreshadowing that can be a big conversation in next year's budget process, is making sure that we adequately fund the required contributions for that plan. So I know that's a little bit of an ominous introduction for our actuary, but it is important that you kind of see a little bit more perhaps this year of what goes into our actuarial reporting for our two pension plans. And maybe I'm sharing a little bit of my gloom and doom with you. So, but we are fortunate to have USI to provide these professional services to the city of Franklin. They are well respected nationally as an actuary firm in their independent analysis. So I will let Kevin Sullivan go through, and he may introduce himself a little bit more than I did, other than we certainly call him, and we receive very good advice in how to help administer both our closed and open pension plans.
All right, well, thanks, Christine. I don't think I'll give myself much more of an introduction. I think Christine did a great job. I will say, so our firm is known as USI Consulting Group, but going back a few years, we have had a couple different names. We were Brian Pendleton Swatson McAllister for about 45 years and had a couple of interim name changes to Finley Davies and then to Finley before we were acquired a couple years ago by USI Consulting Group. So on average, that's only a name change about once every 10 years by keeping the first name for 45 years. So as Christine said, you really have two pension plans. You have the old closed plan, which is where we'll spend most of our time talking about this afternoon, but you also have the open plan that's part of TCRS. So your closed plan, you have much more control over. You have, while the state does have some requirements on discount rates and things like that, you have much more flexibility in setting assumptions and methods for funding that plan. The TCRS plan is much more driven by the assumptions that TCRS themselves set and basically give you the information of what you need to contribute to the plan. An actuary's job is typically we're typically looking in the rearview mirror to try to tell you where to go. And right now, as Christine alluded to, the markets are not performing very well, and so it's going to be and from where we started today to where we ended today, things changed drastically. Today's been kind of an example of the year as a whole. So I think we do want to spend a little bit of time kind of looking ahead to where we might be when we're standing a year from now talking about the 1/1/2023 valuation. What I have for you today is talking about the 1/1/2022 valuation for the closed plan. So we're really kind of just taking a snapshot of the assets and liabilities as of that date and recommending a contribution based on that level. Now, the TCRS information we'll talk about at the end of the presentation, that's based on their fiscal year of a 7/1 measurement period. So it's a little different. Right now, about 2/3 of your active members who are accruing benefits are in the old closed plan, about 1/3 in the TCRS plan. But that's going to change over time. As more folks are hired, they're going to go into the TCRS plan. As folks retire or terminate, they're going to drop off the active list from the old closed plan. So let's see, kind of jump ahead a little bit to slide 4, talking about some assumptions for the closed plan. So every few years, we do what's called an experience study, where we review all the history of the plan for the last 5 years, sometimes looking at a longer period than that. And we recommend modified assumptions. And some of the key assumptions are the discount rate, and that's really the expected rate of return on the trust. Also, mortality is a key assumption. That's based, how long we expect retirees are going to live. Also, such things as salary increases for the active members, rates of retirement, and rates of termination. Those all go into determining the liabilities of the plan that we compare to the assets to recommend a contribution. Now, a process has been ongoing really before our involvement, and we certainly agree with this process and have continued it, of dropping the discount rate by 10 basis points each year. And I think that started when the plan was at an 8% discount rate. This would have been the 10th year of that decrease. We got to 7% this year. So that, again, that's our discount rate at 1/1/2022, and as well as our expected rate of return on plan assets. Now, each time we lower the discount rate, that does raise the liability, because money for a pension plan only comes from two places. It comes from return on assets and contributions. So if we expect less return on assets, contributions have to go up. It's got to come from somewhere. Those are the only two places. So it's as one goes down, the other must go up. So as we lowered the discount rate to 7%, that did raise the liability by about $2 million and raised the recommended contribution by about $200,000. So, and that's a number we'll talk about again in a few moments. Now, on slide 5, this is always an interesting question, and I know this is a question you may get often, is of how well funded is the pension plan. And really the correct answer to that is it depends, because it depends on which measure you're looking at of how well funded the plan is. I've shown 3 primary measures here on slide 5. One is the present value of benefits, and the present value of benefits is the present value of all benefits already earned by your retirees and terminated vested members and expected to be earned by your active members. So this may include service that we think a member is going to perform 20 years from now. It also includes the value of all their future expected pay increases. It's not reasonable to expect to fund those amounts now, because that service is not going to be performed for years. And in general, you should fund those benefits when they're earned. So a benefit that's earned 20 years from now should be funded 20 years from now, but not now. So this liability measure really overstates the current liabilities of the plan. So if you look at that basis, it's $191.1 million of liability versus $160.8 million of assets, and would be only 84% funded. Now, I say only, there's a lot of pension plans in the country that would love to be 84% funded on any measure. But I don't see this as a useful measure of the funded status, because it does include all of those liabilities for future years. Now, really, the second measure is what I view as the best measure. This is what's called the entry age normal accrued liability. It includes only service to date, but does include some of the future compensation increases for those active members. certainly does include all of the liabilities for retirees and deferred vested members. And on that basis, you're 90.7% funded. And generally, anything above 80% funded is considered to be well-funded, although that threshold of what's considered well-funded has improved or risen somewhat in the last few years. I really think 85% is where most plans want to be, and more is better, although certainly there's little benefit in being over 100% funded. I like to think of the unfunded liability as something that you want to keep relatively small and manageable for the plan. And when I say manageable, what I'm really getting at is the ability of the city, or if it's a state plan, the state, to make contributions to reduce that unfunded liability if it grows. So to the extent that the political will, for example, is there to raise contributions as needed to close that gap if the unfunded grows, that's what manageable means in my mind. So certainly I think 90.7 is a great place to be. Most public plans in the country tend to be below that, many well below that, many below the 80% that we talked about. Although most plans throughout the country are improving their funded status, but much of that has been due to good investment returns prior to 1/1/2022 that was helping the funded ratio of the plan. Certainly, as we'll talk about in a moment, that's good investment returns has helped the funded status of this plan. And certainly most plans throughout the country have seen that as well.
Kevin, if you don't mind, may I jump in on this methodology?
Sure.
I wanted to give just another reason why I'm really glad that Kevin spent time on this entry age normal accrued liability, because I know it is a lot of math and it's an accounting type term, but this method is really important because the state of Tennessee has a law from 2014. It's not been in place, since the history of our plan, but since 2014. And those of us with single employer public pension plans in Tennessee, we are now subject to a review by the state treasurer on this methodology, this entry age normal accrued liability, and we actually supply this information to the state treasurer's office every year, and they send us back a letter, which we do present to this committee and our pension committee. But this is the method that the state treasurer's office uses to evaluate this single employer plan. And also within that 2014 law is that if any of these plans that are applicable fall below 60%, they are not allowed to add benefits without the approval in advance of the state treasurer. So I just wanted to point out that there is an importance to this methodology in Tennessee state law that there's a little, I think it correlates to even our actuary's opinion that this is a good methodology, but this is also one that Tennessee state law refers to.
Yeah, great point. In fact, I would say most actuaries use some variation of this method in funding most public plans. So certainly is the preferred method to look at. The last measure, while having some value, I think this can be used to overstate the funded status of a plan, and this is the accumulated benefit obligation. And this is the liability if everyone terminated right now. That's highly unlikely, and so therefore I don't see that as a great measure of the funded status of a plan. And as you might imagine, if everyone terminates right now, all that future compensation increases that's included in the entry age normal accrued liability goes away, as well as the future service that's included in the present value of benefits. So on that basis, you're 108.8% funded. But again, I don't see that as the best measure, certainly, of how well funded the plan is. So I would gravitate towards the 90.7% using the entry age normal accrued liability, and state again that that's better than most plans in the country, and anything above 90% is a great place to be. Now, as you might imagine, going back to the earlier conversation we had about investment return, that's likely to go below 90% unless markets recover before the end of the year. So let's see, moving on to slide 6, which is the slide with a lot of small numbers. But this shows the 2022 results as well as the preceding 3 years. So first I'll comment on the number of participants. As I mentioned earlier, the number of active participants is declining because this is now a closed group. No new active members are coming in. But the number of deferred vested, those are individuals who have a vested benefit but have separated from service and haven't started their benefit yet. And will at a future time. And the retired and disabled are those who have already started their benefit. So The population of deferred vested and retired is expected to continue to grow for a number of years. It will begin to decline as the number of retirees who die outpaces the number of new retirees coming into that population. The annual covered payroll is the payroll of the group covered by the plan. That's been largely stable to slightly declining as the number of, the absolute number of active members declines. The average annual earnings tends to still grow as we move through time, even with a smaller population. And we do show that present value benefits for each year there, as well as the entry age normal, past service liability, or accrued liability. And we compare that entry age normal past service liability with the actuarial value of assets. And the actuarial value of assets, we use a market value. And that is one thing I'll mention that's a little different, where you may be doing something a little different than most plans. But what you're doing is conservative. Most plans use what's called a smoothed method of the value of assets. And what that means is that those plans are ignoring excess gains and ignoring excess losses for up to, in many cases, up to 10 years. I think TCRS uses a 10-year period of time to bring in those gains and losses. So if you're always hitting exactly your expected return, these two methods are exactly the same. But if you have a year where you have great returns, you may ignore some of those returns early on. And in years where you have you have negative returns, you're ignoring some of those negative returns. So as long as using market value doesn't create volatility in the contribution that's difficult to manage, using market value of assets is more conservative, certainly, because you're always mark to market on that basis. You're only counting the actual assets that are there. See, so on that basis, we have what we call an unfunded supplemental liability. So this is just the liability that has been earned to date, but is not covered in the value of assets. So you notice that number is about $16.5 million as of 1/1/2022, and is less than half of what it was just 3 years back at 1/1/2019. So that's and that's something we'll see in a minute. It shows in the improvement in the funded ratio of the plan over time. The total contribution cost of the plan really consists of two pieces. It consists of what we call the normal cost, which is the value of benefits earned by your active population during the current year. And that's about 2.2 to 2.3 million, and that number's been fairly stable to slightly declining over time. And then we also have an amortization component for that unfunded supplemental liability. We offset those by the expected employee contributions. There are some folks in the plan who do make employee contributions, and that gets us to the recommended contribution of just over 4.1 million. Now, if you look at how that number has tracked over the last few years, it's been as high as almost 6 million at 1/1/2019. And that was even with higher discount rates at 2019. Now we have lower discount rates of 7%, and that's actually would have otherwise expected to increase the contribution, but the contribution has decreased over time due to the really good investment return that the plan has seen over the last few years.
And if I.
So we had 40 basis points difference in the 2019 versus, and, yeah, okay.
Yeah, actually 30 basis points.
30?
It's 7 at 2022 and 7.3 at 2019.
And if I would like to just give a specific commentary to the city of Franklin on the required contribution line. This is certainly the calculation that the actuary has made. It does not necessarily correlate to what you as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen appropriate, because this is really more of a minimum, but actually the city administrator's proposed budget for this year actually kept the contribution whole. So you have appropriated $1 million more than was minimally required in this current budget. And of course, part of that was simply we wanted to keep contributing to this closed plan and try to keep it as certainly as stable as possible. But the last couple of years, this board has also put in more than was minimally required, and did that at the end of the budget process after all revenues were known, or most revenues were known and most expenses were known, put additional funds into the pension. So that is something that we certainly use this, and this is a state requirement, and state's making sure that we're putting in what we have to, but our Board of Mayor and Aldermen has committed several times in recent years, and then also there were times beyond the last couple of years, we did a a report for the pension committee that showed how many years of additional contributions in kind of modern times. And there has been a strong commitment by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to put in additional funds when there was an opportunity to do so. So that doesn't mean that, this doesn't mean that this is all you have to put in. This is what you have to put in, but if the board chooses to put in some more to shore up the plan, they have done that in the past.
Let's see, so, let's see, a couple of quick comments here. The recommended contribution as a percentage of payroll covered by the plan has been going down, just as the absolute value of the recommended contribution has been going down. That present value of accrued benefits is the number from the previous page I mentioned. That's not a great measure of how well-funded the plan is. It's also called the security ratio. It's 108.8% now. Was as low as 91.65 back at 1/1/19, so that kind of highlights how the funded ratio of the plan overall has improved in the last few years. See, jumping over to slide 7, just a couple of comments here. The graph here shows over time from 2018 to 2022, the growth in both the liabilities of the plan, shown in gray, and the assets of the plan, shown in the burgundy color. So assets and liabilities both moving up. It's important to note that the liabilities are growing not only due to new benefits being earned in interest, but it's growing because we're lowering the discount rate. So that's part of that growth of the liability you see through those years. While the assets keeping in lockstep with the liabilities and actually growing a little faster than the liabilities is due to better than expected investment return during that period. In the table at the bottom, you see the funded ratio has improved from 82% up to the 90% we currently see. Did drop down a little bit at 1/1/2019. Part of that was due to a growth. Well, I think the assets were a little more flat for the year, but also the liabilities. That was the first year we incorporated all of the assumption changes with the last experience study. So that included not only the discount rate change, but some changes to mortality, retirements, terminations, and other assumptions there. See, on slide 8, this very simple graph just shows the recommended contributions for the last several years going back to 2017. Relatively stable recommended contribution. There's two key forces acting on this. One is the 10% basis point reduction in the discount rate each year should be pushing that contribution up by about $200,000 to $300,000 per year, and the better than expected investment return has been pushing it down. So it's kind of interesting. We started 2017 at 4.2 million. We ended 2022 at 4.1 million. So very similar starting and ending point, even though a lot is happening in between with better than expected investment return and lowering the discount rate each of those 5 years shown there. See, this actually may be a good time to talk about the expected impact of the market downturn during 2022. So as I mentioned earlier, there's two key components of the contribution. There's the normal cost, which is the value of new benefits being earned. That's not driven, that number doesn't get moved around by market activity. The second component, though, is the amortization of unfunded liability, and that does. So each of those numbers are roughly equal right now, although with a downturn in the market, we would expect that amortization component to go up significantly. In total, I think seeing the contribution rate go up by a third or more isn't unreasonable at all to be expected, maybe as much as 50%. And the nice thing is, an increase of 1/3 only takes us back, or actually an increase of 50% just takes us back to where we were a couple of years ago. So it's not something unprecedented in the last 3-4 year history of the plan. Again, I think that's a good place to be, but it's anyone's, as Christine said earlier, we're not at 12/31 yet, so it's anyone's guess as to where we actually end the year. Hopefully markets do recover somewhat and kind of help close the gap of the expected return on the year.
But this is a sample of the type of conversations that staff are having even in advance of the budget process starting. Is certainly, we do have placeholders for something as important as pension contribution, and I do, expect that we take this type of advisement to placehold a higher number into that next year's budget process that this committee will start looking at in January, because we don't know, but this is what we see perhaps as being something that we'll be needing to fund for next year.
Let's see, quickly on slide 9, this is just some demographic information on the planned population. And this goes from 2018 through 2022. And this was effectively the first plan year after the plan was closed. So we started the year at about 900 total participants, and that's slowly declining just as we have a few participants either terminate non-vested, or we have participants, retirees and deferred vested, pass away. In general, this is going to be, you're going to see a continuation of a very slow pattern here of this number declining. What year by year will be more obvious, though, is the continued reduction in the number of active members and the growth in the number of retirees and deferred vesteds. If we were to put another stack here that is the TCRS active members, you're going to continue to see that grow to where your active members may look fairly stable if both groups are combined together. See, on slide 10, just a couple of quick comments. So we like to look each year at the gains and losses for the plan, and this is just changes in the liability that weren't expected due to effectively anything being different than our assumption. And you'll notice the big one here, and it tends to be the big one pretty much every year, is the investment return, whether it's better than expected, as we see here, or worse than expected. So in total, the plan had a gain of 12.7 million, which means we had a reduction in the unfunded liability more than expected of that amount. And more than the total of that was from investment return. Good investment return was a gain of about 16.3 million. Some of the other large components, the retirement and termination decrements, or effectively people retiring or terminating differently than we expected, combined to increase the liability by about 3 million. Another big change was retiree mortality, which means folks passed away faster than expected or at greater rates than expected. That could partially be COVID-related. We haven't dug into the data in great detail to see if that's more than what would normally be expected variation from one year to the next. But across all retirement plans, that is something we are seeing for 2020, 2021. We're seeing greater gains in mortality. Gains is the term we use for a reduction in liability different than expected. And some portion of that is expected to be excess mortality that's COVID-related. So any questions on that before we move over to the brief TCRS plan summary? Okay, so this is on slide 11, and this shows the last 2 years, 2021 and 2022. So TCRS calculates these, and the contribution is made for 1 year following. So the June 30, 2021 valuation is what determines your contribution for the period July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. So at that time, you had 205 active members, just under 10 million of annualized salary for that population, about 70 inactive members. TCRS, they select their own discount rate, and they lower their discount rate certainly less frequently than the city does for your plan with 10 basis points per year. So they did a 50 basis point drop all in 1 year, going from 7.25% for 2020 to 6.75% for 2021. So the present value of the benefits for this population is about 16.6 million. And you'll notice that's a pretty significant increase from the prior year. Part of that is due to the fact that we've lowered the discount rate by 50 basis points. Another component is that this is a much younger active population. So each year of service each new group coming in creates new present value benefits. So that this plan, the liabilities is expected to grow faster certainly than the closed plan. Also, there's very little coming out in the way of benefit payments that reduces the liability. But the total funding of the plan is determined partly by employee contributions, which is a fixed 5%, and partly by the actuarially determined contribution that ADC, that TCRS determines. So that's 7.22% for 2021, up from 5.92% for the prior year. And again, much of that's related to the lowering of the discount rate. The actuarial accrued liability, the portion of that present value benefits that has been earned to date is only 3.3 million versus actuarial value of assets of 3.1. So this, the new plan, if we want to call it, is 94.6% funded, and that's a slight decrease from the prior year when it was 96.6% funded. But again, I would attribute more than that to just the reduction of the discount rate.
It's interesting to note, the number of active members is about a third in TCRS now compared to the closed plan. That's kind of amazing to me in a relatively short time how that has shifted. And the number of retirees in the last 2 years in that closed plan, we've seen a pretty significant surge there as well as people hit those service milestones and
Well,
choose to
remember,
retire.
the people before, 2006, all they had to have was 25 years. Didn't
That's
matter
right.
how old they were.
Yeah.
They could get into it.
So is that hiring?
Well, it's the combination of folks retiring and us bringing in folks in the new TCRS system. We have added some positions, but not a huge number.
Not-
of
but not that
positions.
number
No,
of
not that
positions.
at all. So it's really just that combination over the last few years of retirees and folks coming in that are in the TCRS system, and some of the positions we've added collectively over the last 3 or 4 years. So it's just interesting how quickly it's becoming, and in another 5 years, it'll probably be pretty much equal to one another when we look at active numbers.
Because we'll be at 6 years in the TCRS plan January 1st. So this is how much has changed in almost, well, and even this is a little dated, as Kevin was explaining. You have a point in time and you're looking backwards, but certainly, I think what Eric is describing, about a third of our full-time employees being hired in the last 6 years, it's pretty significant. It's a pretty significant change in the workforce.
And it might be worth noting that certainly TCRS is working on the July 1, 2022 valuation that will determine your contribution for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. And July 1, 2022 falls, well, I'll state the obvious, falls in the middle of 2022. But it also falls in the middle of the declining investment market. So regardless of where we end 2022, it's going to have less of the impact of 2022 in that number, but certainly some impact. So I don't think it's unreasonable to expect the contribution rate to go up a little bit from the investment return. Now, I will say, I think I failed to mention this, the actuarial value of assets that TCRS uses is a smoothed value, and so that's going to mitigate any impact you see for 2022 in terms of the market impact.
But one point, and I think this is a great slide to maybe make this piece of information for the committee, is that the line, the employer required contribution rate, which is 7.22% right now, just to give you there are plans that have been in TCRS. TCRS had it was formed from different public pension plans into what we see now as Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, I believe also in 72, so it's about 50 years in this structure. But when you look at governments who have been 50 or more years in some sort of state pension in the multiple employer program, in this same legacy plan, many of them have been in between 10 and 12% employer contributions. And certainly, we are very favorable, even at 7.22%, that's less than the 14 to 17% that we have in the closed plan that Kevin was just describing. So, it's one of those, as we look at the city as a whole, we knew that we were going to be growing from 5 to 6% we expected to grow to a higher percentage. It may be going a little quicker because of these outside forces of which no one has control over, especially the investment returns. But certainly, last I checked, this is actually a couple of weeks now, but we don't have any retirees currently in the open plan in the new program. We certainly have people who have decided to leave that joined us at the start of the program who are vested, but we don't have any retirees that we're paying benefits for. But we know certainly down the road we will. So we did expect that our contribution rate would grow in TCRS, but there are the plan is different than our our closed plan, and there are some aspects of it that should help keep it contained a little bit more in the long term than that closed plan is experiencing.
What would it take to retire in the new plan?
In the TCRS plan,
In the TCRS, yes.
the TCRS plan does have 30 years of service that are required for full benefits. In practicality, there are, if you retire before age 55, even with 30 years, there are reductions in benefits that maybe some people can handle that, but you just don't, you see really hardly anyone going out before age 55, even if they start, very, very young. But certainly there is early retirement, but it does come with a pretty significant reduction in benefit. But the 30 years of service is, and if you don't have 30 years of service, if you have at least be vested, you can go out at age 60. In TCRS, let's say you came and worked 10 years, you could go out at age 60 without a reduction in benefits, but of course you just earn benefits
10
based on 10 years of service. So TCRS is, it's a long-standing, certainly for folks who know people who have worked for other governments who've been in TCRS or worked for school districts or for the state. It's a very it's a well-funded plan, but it's a well-managed plan as well. It's something that people have depended upon for many, many years, and it's been beneficial to many people.
And let us also say, which I do every year because I'm a, recipient of this, that this is one of the best state plans in the United States.
Yes, it is. It's consistently one of the top 5 rated plans in the country. It's a model that, and what Treasurer Lillard administers is, I was actually in a meeting last Friday with a treasurer from another state across the country, and she considers Treasurer Lillard actually one of the models in the country, and I always like to talk to her because she always wants to talk about what's going on in the Tennessee's Treasury Department and she's retiring and she's got no reason to say otherwise, but she really views the staff that Treasurer Lillard leads as being a model for treasurers across the country. So I think we're extremely fortunate, Alderman Peterson, just like you say, that we have that model in Tennessee State Department of Treasury.
Right, and not all states have an arrangement like this where municipalities can come into the state plan and contribute and kind of have a good structure in place to allow them to have a good benefit and manage the cost effectively.
Any other questions?
I got a quick comment if I
Okay.
could. And this is really directed maybe to our employees and also some to aldermen that don't sit on the pension committee, but we've been fortunate enough to have a very stable pension committee over a long period of time, and with the focus of making sure that we're working to create a predictable, dependable, funded retirement plan for our employees. And Clyde's been leading that committee for I don't know how long, I think forever. It seems like, Clyde.
And I'll be quite honest, I don't remember. I use the term, or at times when we moved the money from Chattanooga to here, and I think that was probably 93 or 94. So we had an annuity policy with some insurance company in Chattanooga, and I think it was maybe $3 million or something or other. And then they discounted that heavily because we moved it before maturity. And I thought maybe that might be my last day to run for office, right? Any other questions of Kevin?
Well, I hope this was a helpful presentation for the committee to certainly, he does, USI and Kevin Sullivan do provide us these professional services, and we do appreciate the working relationship. But we will be anxiously, once we get to December 31st, on the closed plan, we'll be submitting we always submit lots of required information to our actuary, and they are busy working, as this committee works on the budget process, they are busy working on our required contribution that we finalize right before the city administrator prepares his budget there in the spring. So I hope this helps give a little bit of that context of what will be going on all at the same time during the winter and early spring months. It's a really important process, and so I appreciate you sitting through this
Yeah,
today.
I would drop one of these in each of the alderman's mailbox. They don't have enough in there now, so we'll put some more information, but they need to really understand that, and that there's $100 million sitting out there, give or take, that has grown considerably from my example years ago. If there's no other questions, then let's go to item 5, which is review of FY 2023 budget process survey and recommendations for FY 2024 budget.
Well, I'm going to take the lead on this. Michael Walters-Young is out ill today, so I'm going to do my very best Michael Walters-Young. So, good afternoon. I'm Eric Stuckey, your city administrator, and I'm going to walk through the budget survey with you. Michael's done a great job of collecting information, not only from our Board of Mayor and Aldermen, but also from our staff team. And we wanted to bring that together for you to reflect for you, first of all, the review of what we got in the survey, especially from the board. We've also incorporated in your attachments the survey that we did with our staff team, with our leadership team. So the department directors and division managers that all are involved in the budget process provided very similar feedback on very similar questions to you. So we'll review those findings, and then we have a recommendation based on the feedback we got from you about how we might tweak the new process, or the fiscal 2024 budget process that is just around the corner. So let's walk through the next couple slides. I just talked about that one, so let's go on to our first slide about the process here. You know, both BOMA and staff were asked to fill these out. We specifically talked about their satisfaction or and sought feedback on the presentation materials, the process with this committee, the decision-making and development process that we go throughout the end of this calendar year and into the spring, and the support that is provided by the budget and analytics staff, provided by the city administrator, and our engagement with the public, with the community. So we tried to assess that from everybody, and I'll walk through both the survey results and a summary of comments. The first question we talked about was asking about the budget materials themselves that were provided, level of satisfaction. We give you a 1 through 5 scale, 5 being very satisfied and 1 being very unsatisfied. And you see on this and throughout here, pretty strong rating of satisfaction overall and the materials that are provided. When we go to the comments themselves, what we saw was some comments about the meetings being long. We understand that. And that's one of the things we'll get to in our recommendations. We also have one that is reflected on as multi-year comparisons. We do try to provide that to you with all the materials that we have. So we'll make sure that that's clear as we see that. And one of the things we provide up front is some of our base assumptions around our projections, inflationary assumptions, and different elements as they work through the process. So making sure that's clear. We did have an inquiry about wanting to identify specifics around consultants and the use of third parties and why those are used. That sounds like more of a budget process or budget research item that we certainly can highlight if that's the desire of this committee and of the board overall. And then just generally good comments about a lot of information provided. The next question gets at the budget review with this committee. And that level of satisfaction, again, a good level of satisfaction there. When we look to the comments, we see more focus on the look forward, the program enhancements themselves, less of a year in review feel. And I will admit, we probably put a little more emphasis on background because we knew half of our board was new this year. So we probably provided more of that than we normally would, and we hear that feedback and recognize that we will put more focus on not so much where we've been, but where we need to go and what those priorities are, that's really what you're most interested in. And then the final bullet there gets at really this interaction of understanding and processing priorities in the big picture as we get through all the departments, because we look at them individually and see snippets of it, but at the end, having a little more time to step back and kind of process that together, which I would find helpful in my process in making a recommended budget to you, provided that to you. So the next slide kind of gets at more detail in that same way about talking about the decision points and how we weigh those together. Again, there's a sense that this is not a process that's broken, but that a way that we can enhance it. So things are generally working well, but how do we make it better? How do we focus on key decision points? So the next question talked about the decision-making process leading up to the city administrator's proposed budget and those recommendations. And again, this gets at the idea of asking questions and digging into particular areas of interest, providing ample opportunity for that, giving you all an opportunity to discuss together things that you've noted, things that may be priorities in your minds, and of course, the question of there being important emphasis on the input of department directors. Part of what you don't see that happens before it ever gets to you is there's a lot of review that happens between the city administrator, the budget staff, and those departments. But we don't really edit what they bring to you. They're bringing to you their priorities, but we do have discussions around how to best frame those. The priorities that you see are the department director's priorities. They're not my priorities. They're theirs, and that's an important place that we emphasize that, and we'll make sure that that's clear, and maybe even more discussion as to why those are top priorities for them. As you talked about, you want to hear more about the level and the key levels of importance or priority for those department directors.
Well, we've chimed in at times, not a lot. When somebody brings something other, they're needing, I'll try to make up an example, they're needing 2 pickup trucks for the department head and the assistant department head in one, and they both function in the same manner. They can go make one trip for somebody's trash bag that hasn't got picked up. And they wanted to, and we said, make sure that you stick with it and get 2 out of it then. But I think we've encouraged them.
Yeah.
But may have not encouraged fully or whatever. But yeah, there's been times when that's been done. So
Yeah, I think so. And that's just some of the feedback we're working on, make sure we share with you. The fourth question we asked was around budget staff and how satisfied you are with the level of support received by the budget and analytics staff. This was highly rated. It was pointed out to me that it's slightly higher than the rating that was given to the city administrator. I have to say, I agree with that. That was a good observation. It's true.
I did not point that out.
No, it might be somebody who's not here who pointed that out to me. So anyway, but in all good conscience, and it was only 0.01 difference, but there was a difference. So, but they do a good job, provide a thorough amount of information. Talks about a great partnership, good teamwork, and good information, and that was very much echoed in what we saw from staff in terms of that level of support and helping through that process.
Could you go back to that slide that was showing the satisfied?
Yes.
What am I missing there? It says one was being very unsatisfied, but when I look at below there, there's nobody that's listed as unsatisfied. It's just satisfied or very satisfied.
Oh, that's just describing the range. So if you put a 1 down, that means you're very unsatisfied. If you put a 5, that means you're very satisfied.
I got you.
So in this case, we heard from all 9 of you, mayor and alderman. There may be some who skipped a question. This showed that 7 said very satisfied and 1 said satisfied. So it was very highly rated.
Okay.
All right, so on to the city administrator's involvement in the budget process. Again, that was well rated. It talks about making sure that we have clear and totally transparent and honest feedback about what the needs and ideas and concerns are with the department directors. That's something we really focus on. I think it's somewhat unique in other places I've been that we provide that direct ability for department directors to speak to it, and I encourage that, and I will continue to work on that. And then it talks about the ability, in this third bullet, the ability to speak to budget priorities with me collectively as we look at those priorities together, and I think we're going to talk about some ways to do that. All right, so let's move on to the next one. This is the sixth area we talked about, which is the accessibility and engaging our budget materials, how they are for the members of our public. And this was not rated quite as high, but still has a pretty good level of satisfaction. The comments reflect, there's a lot of information there. I think if you choose to, you can delve into a lot of information, but it is a long process. And, you know, one of the things that struck me is talks about not sure how much the public wants to be involved. It's up to them, but it's certainly the content is there. And we do try to find ways to share it in a consistent, very readable format. The numbers are there if you want the numbers, but there's also narratives that help you understand how departments function and what their priorities are. So we try to strike that in a balance and making it accessible, understandable. We know people understand and relate to different data and content differently. So we try to provide a couple different ways of getting the data to folks. And as it says, there's lots of data, lots of numbers. And I think it's there. And we'll continue to work on ways to make that accessible to folks. And we've done things with the open format data manipulation that folks can do on their own about looking at both budgets and performance numbers. And we'll continue to emphasize that as we go forward. And then just some closing comments and summary comments here. Again, kind of maybe too much time spent on department presentations, maybe condensing that and providing some more time for processing it. And again, a sense that we continue to improve the process every year, and getting your feedback helps us do that. So let's look at what we pulled from it and what, at least from a staff perspective, we would ask you to think about. Again, the key takeaways: overall satisfaction, a sense that maybe departmental presentations can be condensed or streamlined, and to focus on the go forward on that, and then some opportunity to review together the program enhancements and priorities kind of near the end of the process before we get into the recommended budget from the city administrator. So to help do that, our recommendations are to look at largely keeping the current schedule, but maybe condensing presentations into those middle months, those February and March timeframes, so that you get all those departments done. We maybe streamline those presentations, get that content done for you through that first meeting in April. Let's go to the next slide. That kind of gives some specifics on the time frame. And we would probably group them by functional areas, but by the first meeting in April, we would provide you with a comprehensive list of all the program enhancements. You get them department by department, but give them to you comprehensively, maybe give you about 10 days to process them, and ask you to give us your top 5. It doesn't mean those are the only things that are important, but it gives us a sense of what stood out to you from all those presentations, and then maybe bring those together and see what that shows us, what there are themes about, and give you an opportunity to reflect on that together, and really do that together in that second meeting in April. So the first meeting in April, we'll close out everything. We have our outside agencies we talk to, make sure you all have the information you need on the program enhancements, then collect that, bring those priorities together, and use that as a discussion point, and use that last meeting in April, that second meeting in April, as sort of a processing time. Both you with me and you together, and any of the other aldermen that want to be part of that. Give them an opportunity to weigh in on anything they saw that they thought is important. So from there, we've got a fairly strict timeline of getting it out in early May so that we can hit the benchmarks we need to have public comment and process and 3 votes and public hearing and all of that. So we want to make sure we do that, and we think we can still accommodate that and create some space for a little more feedback and time for you to discuss together and with me what key priorities are for you, so that can help shape what we bring forward to you in May. So that's kind of what we've processed from what you've shared with us and what we've reflected on the process itself. Christine obviously works very closely with this, and Mike does as well. I welcome any other comments they want to share with you, and then turn it over to you for any questions, comments, feedback you want to provide to us. So, Christine, Mike?
Well, if I could, also, there's one, when all of this information came in to Michael and Eric to process through, I was looking at the calendar year 2023 and looking at how this would fit in with the year, and perhaps if we could pull up, there's an attachment that is a draft calendar for 2023. And this is just a draft on Civic Clerk, but actually what we were also looking at was kind of, big holidays in 2023, some staff conflicts that we know of,
Spring break.
and spring breaks, things like, just trying to find anything in 2023 to get ahead of for your consideration for what next year looks like. And certainly, what we did look at together was the month of March, and March and April, because we know we have Easter there. We also have, there's just a
Spring
lot
break in
going
the
on.
middle
Spring
of the-
breaks are
of the
in
month
there. And
of
so
March.
we actually, on this draft version, which we want your feedback, there are 3 meetings in the month of March. There's 1 meeting in the month of April because of the Easter holiday. I know that was something that we did draft on here, where there would be the first and second weeks of March, there would be meetings. We're actually that second week asking for your consideration for a Wednesday meeting, because we have a conflict with a state meeting that your finance officers attend on Thursday, March the 9th. But then also maybe avoiding Easter week, which this year that is Easter
First week of April, right?
is the first week of April is Easter. The Good Friday holiday is April 7th this year. So certainly something for feedback is perhaps looking at how you see us and laying out the year. And we have not been able to find Williamson County's fall break for next year, but we also want to be looking for that for whenever it's announced, in case we need to consider that into a calendar. But this is kind of a first shot at perhaps.
Yeah, so really the big difference is kind of moving that first meeting in April to make it March 30th, just so that we work around the Easter holiday and some of the time impact there, and then allows us to get that feedback really in mid-April too, which gives us a little time to process and turn into a recommended budget for you around the first Friday in May is typically when we release the proposed budget. So we think this fits well with that. We would consolidate those departmental presentations really into that February and March timeframe for the most part, and give you time to process and give us feedback at that April 13th meeting. So open it up for any comments or questions or thoughts you have as you've considered this.
I'll throw one in there. We might need to add in FSSD, spring break, and fall break in there. I don't see that one listed. I see Williamson County, though.
Good point.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily.
Well, I know if Patrick's on the
Typically,
board,
they're
I
the
don't-
same, but we'll check it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Typically, try to align that.
We had one year
Yeah.
where they didn't cross
Yeah.
over.
We'll double check that. I think this does put into consideration Williamson County's for sure, which is the middle of March. But we'll check FSSD on that too.
Well, how many on the committee have a conflict with spring and fall break? You?
Probably Jason and Patrick, I would guess, and probably me as well,
Okay, well,
this year in particular.
well, I mean, I'll say this, I understand somewhat the length of the meetings and the length of some of the presentations. I also believe this, I believe it gives the department heads an opportunity to meet face-to-face with us, understand, maybe make some requests. Maybe some of them are not necessarily requests that we can honor, they're based upon the budget entirely for the city. But I think it's an opportunity for them to come before us and for us to see them. They have an opportunity to bring anybody with them that they want to, if that's their time. And I'm not looking, I personally am not looking to shorten their time or make it appear as if they're being rushed based upon a survey here that says the meetings are too long. They are what they are, and they have been for a long, long time, much longer than the length of the meeting.
Yeah.
So, I don't see any reason to change it. And as far as the dates are concerned, I understand that my schedule personally is much more flexible than anybody else's. I won't be here for the meeting. That's what I'm obligated, committed to do, so.
Well, I think having the 2 meetings per month
Yeah.
that we went to this year helps us a little bit with that time. It makes that so you're
Meetings are not quite
not
as long.
so drawn out in terms of having a 4-hour meeting. It just feels better to keep it into those shorter, multiple but shorter timeframes. So I think that helps.
Yeah.
But I think we can put some focus on specifically the needs and the program enhancements. I think that's where you all want to spend a little more time, and
think
we can
so.
make sure that happens.
Yep.
But you're still hearing the department directors and that team's voice, which is important in this process.
I'll throw one more thing out there that was not in the survey results, but as we're looking at the calendar that y'all put together, is being new on the committee, but I would actually welcome the opportunity to go and visit on site if a department head knows that they're going to be asking for some significant equipment purchases or something that's going to be happening. Doesn't have, I mean, it can be in City Hall. I mean, we could be going to sit down with legal, whatever it might be, but I would certainly welcome any of the department leaders to reach out and say, hey, here's what our calendar is. We're going to have our first meeting coming up in early February. We'd like to invite you in November, December, January timeframe, just to kind of look at what the state of our department is right now, so that when we present, you have a better understanding. So, just putting that out there to.
All right, very good. Other feedback? comments?
Anything, Ann?
I was just going to say, it's a good thing I'm not employed.
Yeah, it's
Because
a time
really,
commitment.
really.
You all
And especially
earn your money
during
on this
the-
committee.
During the day, I mean, but it worked out okay, but still.
If there are no other questions or comments,
I would throw one thing out there on the calendar piece of it, and I think maybe it's because Alderman Peterson just said this, is if we know that one of the meetings might be shorter than the other, instead of, because I am balancing both, if we know one's going to be shorter than the other, instead of starting at 3 and then ending early, it would be better to bump back to 3:30 or to 4 o'clock to have that meeting, if we're going to have, a stop time of 5 o'clock, for example. That might work better. I know that Alderman Baggett and I have, discussed that about not just this committee, but about others as well.
We try to balance them
Yeah.
when we put them together. Sometimes you don't know perfectly how long they're going to take, but we try to keep them pretty consistent, especially with the budget materials, because we know that time is valuable, and we have a block of it, and we want to make the most of that use. But we hear you on that, too.
Perfect.
Would it be of help to the committee if, certainly, I did look historically, it seems like Williamson County announces their fall break. I think I found that last year they announced it sometime in November. The next time that this committee meets is December 1st to hear our audit. What we can do is, I think before then, certainly we will check FFSD's break schedule, and I'll be looking for anything else from Williamson County Schools on their calendar. And may we bring this back to the December 1st meeting just to see if you all have any more feedback on the calendar before we get ready to actually enter into 2023. I'd be glad to do that.
I just looked it up. Franklin Special and Williamson County share the same spring break. So March
That's good to
13th
know.
through the 17th, they
Okay.
both
and
have that same date.
that schedule works around
And we're
that.
steering clear of that
This-
week, yes.
And we may be able to know more about the fall part of the year And I'll look for that, but if we can maybe bring this back to December 1st, and then just see if there's anything else that, as you think about this, based on the context of the conversation, because certainly we hit it pretty heavy, and anything that we can do to help you all get these dates on your, get dates on your calendar for the first half of the year, we as staff want to do that for you, to help that as well.
The other thing to think about, and I'm just checking my memory on this, I believe we started earlier during some of these, didn't we, or did we stick with 3? We didn't do anything earlier, okay.
We used to.
Some years we've started earlier
Used
for
to
the
start
budget
early.
ones. We stuck with 3? Okay, all right, never mind.
Any other questions or comments? If not, let's see what we've got next then. Let's go to item 6, report on the state controller's review of the city's 2021 annual report.
I may, Mr. Chairman, just introduce this item, and Mike, our comptroller, is going to go into a little bit of more specifics than I will, but certainly it's customary for this committee to sit as our audit committee on the combined November-December meeting when our external auditor, who is currently Crossland, comes in and gives you a report that is which is an independent report, similar to what our actuary did a little bit today, based on their professional opinion of our review, of our records. But in this case, you have that report that's given to you around the 1st of December every year. We do submit the audit to 2 different entities. One is required, the other one is not required, but we do get 2 separate reviews of our audit every year. And one review that is required is by the State of Tennessee's Comptroller's Office. And that's what we have a written review of that we're going to be submitting to you today. We also submit our audit it's a non-required review, but it is an independent review by the Government Finance Officers Association. And that is also done in a fairly similar fashion, where there are independent reviewers that go through and determine if it's sufficient, but also provide comments to help us in the future to make as our comptroller Mike Lowe says, he wants to have a perfect audit, and we certainly, there's no perfect anything, but Mike strives always for a perfect audit. So we take these comments, take them to the heart, and we work on them for the next year.
So no highlighter coming back to you, right?
So,
All right.
so we always work to have this perfect report, but knowing that a perfect report, our reports they do go through 2 independent reviews, and there's certainly different types of commentary. And I will give you that my review of what we did receive back from the comptroller's office, which of course it is provided to you directly from the comptroller's office, but we as your staff always come back and give you this report as well, is that certainly the comptroller's office is asking us to do some changes which may involve how certain aspects are what's labeled. We certainly can. We always are looking for constructive ways to follow accounting standards exactly to the letters of the laws that are always changing. However, we do believe that our financial statements, our auditors and the state, as well as our Government Finance Officers Association review, say that our financial statements are calculated correctly. They are fair. That we are presenting the accurate information to outside, whether it be a bond holder or a bond rating agency. Anyone who looks at these audited financial statements will be able to tell about the financial health and the financial position of the city of Franklin. So we take this very seriously. We always are looking to have all our reports to be the best they possibly can be, but we do believe that our financial statements do accurately represent our financial position. And so with that, I'll invite our comptroller to give his response, and his commentary, as well as commentary from we have consulted with our auditor, Crossland, Jennifer Matternock, to go through and give a little bit of her flavor of her response to the comments.
Good afternoon. As Christine says, we always strive for 0. So when we saw the letter come in and we saw the 10, we're always thinking, what is it that we need to implement in 2022 when we do this new report? So what we did is we looked through it and we came up with these responses. And the reason you didn't have them till today is not only did we just want to make sure that we felt comfortable with them, we wanted to make sure Crossland, the auditors, also felt comfortable. And I met with her this morning just to make sure she felt comfortable as well. And what I saw when I looked at the comments is they're not questioning the numbers. In essence, what it looks like, it's the way that we have some things labeled. And maybe the one comment, though, I do want to mention, because it is valid what she says about the prior period adjustment. If you remember when Jennifer did her presentation, she talked about the prior period adjustment being that GIS now tracks alleys for the city. So in essence, they were capital assets. So in essence, we had the note written to say prior period adjustment for assets or for the alleys. And when I looked at it after we received the letter, I noticed that note did not make it into the draft. So what we would like to do is respond back to the comptroller's office, say we're going to implement the comments that they have pointed out. And so I wanted you as the audit committee to see these are the responses we believe are appropriate. So we think the comments were valid, but we just know that most of them seem to be what we had labeled something, not necessarily any questions about the amounts.
Definitely minor.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions or comments on the letter back, well, I guess the comments back to Mrs., is it Bellar? Okay. Any questions? Then, Mike, let's go to monthly reports for October 2022.
On monthly reports, I have 2 highlights and 1 update. And on the 2 highlights from the monthly reports, if you look at local sales tax, we received $4.8 million in the month of July versus last July of $4.6 million. This was an increase of 6%, and this basically falls along the lines of what we've seen of having these amounts be over $4 million. The second highlight is if you look at the development fees, how we always say they're based on just the timing of development, you'll notice all of them were down compared to last August. And what I noted was that last August was a very good month. So in essence, you're comparing probably what is a typical month to actually a very good month in the previous year. And the update that I want to let the committee know, as we were submitting the numbers to the auditors, and last month you heard that the general fund would have a surplus of $10.4 million. As we were finishing up the numbers, we looked at one reimbursement that, according to accounting rules, you have to receive by August 31st to be revenue in 2022. Seeing that it did not come in by August 31st, it did come in quickly. It came in September, but because of accounting rules, we didn't lose that $1.5 million. It essentially, instead of being in 2022, you will see it in the 2023 financials. Christine, did you have anything?
And we have confirmed, when this revenue came in September, mid-September, when we got notification, it's a revenue that we knew was coming, but it was, the timing's a little bit out of our control when we receive it. So when we started double checking as the money came in, we have received the reimbursement, but accounting rules do require us after 60, once we get past that 60 days, we had to back out that entry, and we did confirm. We notified the auditor that the day that the check came in. So we have reduced that, as Mike said.
Yeah.
We have reduced with that number, with the fund balance for June 30th will be reported, but it is in accordance with accounting rules, and it will be part of fiscal '23.
Anything else?
I do have one more addition to monthly reports that I would wanted to give this committee some information, is that the city administrator, I believe, I know he gave the Board of Mayor and Aldermen an update that city property taxes, which are billed by County Trustee Karen Paris, that those are available for property owners to review online on the county trustee's website. She is in the process of mailing paper bills, but any property owner may go online and see what their current tax bill is. What I wanted to give the committee just an update on was that initial tax roll. That is information that we have received from the county trustee. And what I do at this point, because of course this is very early in the process, this is looking at what the tax roll, the initial tax roll is compared to, I like to compare it to the previous year just to see what that change is. And this is real property, personal property. She will be doing some additions and adjustments, along the way, but certainly this is the majority of real property and personal property. The initial tax roll was $23.7 million for the city of Franklin, which is a 3.1% increase over the initial tax roll last year in October, which was just right at $23 million. It's an addition of a little over $700,000. So that certainly is a healthy increase. This is a year in which this is a new growth. The city did not change the property tax rate. And the county did nothing to change. Of course, this was not a revaluation year. This is a little bit more of a stable year as far as the pieces that go into creating what the initial tax roll amount is. So last year when we had a revaluation, we have a lot more moving pieces. So this additional tax growth is from new growth in the tax valuation. So 3.1% is something that we would expect to see based on history that we have had. So there is one more piece of property taxes, the utility taxes, that public utility taxes are billed more like about the first of the calendar year in Tennessee, because the assessments are generated actually by the state, and it's a little different timing, but certainly for real property and personal property, those bills have been generated, and they are due on the same calendar schedule as the county property taxes, which is being due by February 28th. And those are collected throughout the next several months and remitted back to the city in accordance with the processes with the county trustee's office. So tax season has begun, and so that is something we like to just give this committee some information about every fall as we become aware.
Did I go over the last year property tax, this year property tax, one more time? How much did it only increased how much?
The initial roll is an increase of 3.1%, initial tax roll.
Okay.
And so that is the 3.1%, which is $23.7 million is this year's tax roll versus right at $23 million for last year. And since of course the city did not change the rate, that was the same rate as last year. That's reflective purely of growth, which new homes or new commercial businesses, whatever is considered taxable property, is generating growth.
Can you give us the net asset value from last year
Yeah.
versus this year?
I can back into that. I don't have, that's not on the same report, but I can back into
Like
what the assessed
valuation
property.
is what you're looking
Yes.
for? Assessed
I can
valuation?
back
We can
into
get you
that, because of course, in Tennessee, we have different, the different categories of property taxes have different assessment ratios. So I can't just take this amount because we have
We can get you that.
but I can get into it from a different way. But we have residential's 25% assessment, commercial's 40%. And then we also have a personal property, which is on a different schedule. So, but no, we certainly, we can get that to look, and that will actually look into which category has growth in it, whether it be.
Yeah.
See,
what
off the top of
aspect?
my head, I would just thought that with the amount of growth that we had, even if we kept the property tax the same, which we did, that it would have been more than that. And that's her estimate anyway, isn't it? Is it
Well,
not?
No, this actually
This is
is,
the actual tax.
this
Oh,
is
that-
billed.
okay.
Now, there will be adjustments, and of course, utility taxes, which is a small amount relative to this, will be along the way. But this is a good indication, is that initial roll.
Good enough.
And that's a decent amount in a single year. It really
is.
is, just compared to, I think we have assumed much less than that typically in the budget, but that's a good growth.
It is, and there's also, just as Mike was talking about the timing of building permit revenues, there's something very similar when it comes
lag,
to
yeah.
when, certainly when, many times we know when large projects, and maybe the total valuation, but the exact year that it's going to hit the tax roll is usually, it's better to let that happen rather than try to predict it, because there's a timing aspect to when something will be recorded for tax purposes. At its full valuation, there may be a partial, but the full valuation is dependent upon when it actually gets done.
And probably whenever it's reappraised, you know it's going to be, because think about how much houses have sold for,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes,
I'm
that's
not,
that's a
I'm
good
not sure how
point.
much of that we capture, though.
Oh, no, whenever they
Eventually,
do the
yeah,
reappraisal.
when the reappraisal happens.
Yeah, but see, in fact, you could do it like every 10 years or every 5 years or something.
So we're
But
going to
they were
4?
No,
It's
but
gone to
they-
4,
That
yeah.
I was going to
Going to
say.
4.
Tennessee
Yeah,
only
that's what
allows
Brad said.
choices of 4 or 5. In Tennessee, you can choose, the county commission can choose between a 4-year cycle and a 5-year cycle.
definitely-
And Williamson County decided to go to the 4-year cycle.
From 5 to 4, yeah.
Yes, but there are some states, Alderman Peterson's correct, that wait a long time and that's very difficult to deal with.
If you don't have a lot of growth, put it off.
Well, wait, this is just talking about things that are already built, because I just had.
Well, that's true.
Some people that live close to me said, we sure are glad that we bought here 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, because the same houses are going for
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Okay, I had 2 things. One of them was the road impact fees look like they're way, way, way down from a year ago. And that seemed kind of unusual, you know. And the other one was the city facilities tax. It's just, I mean, that's just really, see, I've forgotten what number that is now. It's probably page 20 or something, no, image 10 or something like that. I mean, they're the lowest that I've seen in, I mean, they were lower than any single month. Well, one of them was lower than any single month last year, and the other one was only higher than 1 month last year. All the other months, it was lower. And so I just wanted to make a comment and see if we could find out, you know, something about.
Both of those are kind of driven by that cyclical development, and they pay at certain times in the development process. So there are some ebb and flow there, but we'll look at
But
that
I
a
mean,
little
that
further.
is really,
Yeah.
as I say,
The fact that both of those dipped, those kind of work in concert. That makes
sure.
sense that they followed each other, but I agree, it is
But I mean,
one of the lower
they're-
numbers we've seen in some time.
that's right, exactly. Okay, thanks. I don't have anything else. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? And then other business, we've already covered that. Then the next item on the agenda is a motion to adjourn. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I assume there's none opposed.